A desperate cry echoed through the cold evening air, rising from deep within the swamp. A German shepherd, trapped and struggling to break free from the thick, sticky mud, let out another pitiful howl. Adam, a tired factory worker, couldn't ignore the sound. With his heart pounding, he rushed forward, unsure of what he would find or what it would cost him. Little did he know, this fateful rescue would not only change the dog's life, but lead Adam to an unexpected twist that would forever alter his own. Stay with us until the end, because you won't believe how this dog repaid the man who saved him. I am Adam, 37 years old, a factory worker at a steel mill, a place as grim and noisy as it sounds, where the air smells like burning metal and the rhythmic hum of machines fills the silence. Some people think I'm strong, that I've got it all together. They don't know the weight I carry, the exhaustion that grips my bones. The truth is, I'm drained, hollowed out, a man slowly being consumed by the heavy, relentless monotony of life. And every day, it gets harder to hide the cracks in my spirit. The factory has a way of grinding you down, the constant clang of metal against metal, the roar of the furnaces as they melt steel, the unbearable heat that clings to your skin even after you've left for the day. It's not a job that leaves room for much thought. Just do your part, repeat the motions, and wait for the shift to end. The days blur together, and when they do end, I find myself back in the same place, in the same narrow, dimly lit apartment that no longer feels like a home. Rebecca, my ex-wife, left over a year ago. A year, long enough to feel the echo of her absence, but short enough to still have the memory of her lingering, like the faint scent of perfume on a shirt you never want to wash. She left without a word, without a fight. It wasn't dramatic, no final shouting match, no anger-filled argument. It was just one day, she was gone, like she had slipped into the cracks of the floorboards, leaving nothing but silence and emptiness behind. I was supposed to be fine with it. I told myself I'd be fine. But every time I walk through the door to my empty apartment, I realize just how hollow that fine really is. The apartment feels too big, too quiet. I don't know how to fill the space anymore. I've spent so many nights staring at the ceiling, tracing the shadows with my eyes, wishing I could sleep through it all. In the silence, it's hard not to think of the things that went wrong, the way we'd fallen out, how the love we once had became more of a habit than a feeling. We tried, or at least I tried, but somewhere along the way, the smiles stopped coming, the laughter stopped echoing through the walls. I don't know when it happened, but I knew she had given up long before she actually walked out. I never talk about it, not to anyone. People ask if I'm okay, but I just nod and say I'm fine. I've become an expert at it, wearing that mask like it's my second skin. I don't think anyone would understand anyway. There's nothing glamorous about a broken man trying to pick up the pieces of a life that's fallen apart. The factory is the only place I find some semblance of peace, not because I enjoy it, but because it's predictable, reliable. The machines don't ask questions, they don't judge. They don't expect me to be anything other than a cog in the system, pushing forward until the end of the shift. There's something comforting in that, something familiar in the way the hours stretch out like a never-ending chain, each one a link that ties me to the next. But even there, I can't escape the feeling of being trapped. The steel beams overhead, the conveyor belts whizzing by, the sound of metal grinding against metal, all of it reminds me that I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this factory, stuck in this life. The workers around me all seem to have a purpose, a goal. But not me. I'm just going through the motions, a body in the crowd, unseen and unheard. There's a sense of quiet resignation in the air, and I can feel it sinking into my bones, spreading through my veins. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. I've lost track of who I was before the factory, before Rebecca, before all of this. I used to have dreams, I think. At one point, I wanted more. But now, it feels like those dreams have been swallowed up by the same machinery that dominates my life. I look around at the faces of the other workers, tired just like me, and wonder if any of them feel the way I do, or if they're just better at hiding it. The silence of my apartment at the end of the day is always worse than the noise of the factory. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. At least in the factory, there's a rhythm to it all, a purpose. At least there I can lose myself in the work and forget for a while. At home, though, it's just me and the echoes of my own thoughts. No distractions, no sounds to drown out the feeling of being utterly alone. I spend most of my nights sitting on the couch, scrolling through the same apps on my phone, mindlessly clicking through images of people doing things, living their lives, moving forward. I wonder what that feels like, to be moving forward, to have somewhere to go, something to reach for. It's been a year since Rebecca left, and I've barely spoken to her since. Every now and then I'll catch a glimpse of her on social media, in pictures with friends, laughing, living. I wonder if she's happy now, if she's found what she was looking for, and I wonder if I ever really knew her at all. I thought I'd be fine. I thought time would heal everything. But it hasn't. It never does. Not really. Time just stretches out like an endless, unfeeling machine, and we have no choice but to follow it. I find myself staring at the clock at work, counting down the seconds until the shift ends. But it's not the clock that's holding me captive. It's my own mind. It's the weight of everything I've lost, the things I didn't know how to fix, the way I failed to be what Rebecca needed. The guilt and regret sit heavy in my chest, suffocating me. Some nights I think about what would have happened if I had just tried harder, if I had done things differently. But the what-ifs don't matter. They never do. We all make choices, and some of them stick with us no matter how much we wish we could forget. So here I am, stuck in this life, stuck in this factory, stuck in this apartment, stuck in this version of myself that I'm not sure I even recognize anymore. I can't go back to who I was, and I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be now. But one thing is certain. I don't want to stay here forever. I don't want to keep going through the motions. I want something more, even if I don't know what that is. And that's when it happens. That's when everything changes. Because in the midst of this emptiness, I hear something I never thought I'd hear again. A voice, a sound, a call for help. And it comes from a place I least expect, outside, in the cold, muddy swamp near the edge of the factory. It's a cry that reminds me of the very thing I've been missing all this time. Connection. Something or someone calling out in pain, in desperation, reaching for help. And in that moment, something stirs inside me. Something I thought I'd lost. Without thinking, I head toward the sound, because sometimes when you're stuck, the only way out is to reach for someone else. And maybe, just maybe, in the act of saving another, you can save yourself. After long, grueling shifts at the steel mill, I often found myself driving aimlessly, the sound of the engine humming beneath me a welcome distraction from the noise in my head. It wasn't that I was running away from anything specific, but the quiet of the road, away from the loud machines and the constant din of factory life, was the only place I could find peace. The hum of the tires against the pavement was my solace, a strange kind of therapy for a mind worn thin. That day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, I decided to take the long way home. The road was empty, save for the occasional passing car, and the fading daylight bathed the world in a muted golden hue. I veered off the main road, following a narrow dirt path that led along a deserted field. The land around me was untamed, a patchwork of tall grass and brush that stretched into a distant horizon, beyond which lay a lonely, forgotten swamp. I had driven this route before, but never had I felt such an inexplicable pull to continue. It was as though the wind had whispered to me, urging me to venture further. The air was thick with the scent of earth, and the rustling of the leaves in the gentle breeze was the only sound that accompanied me as I made my way deeper into the quiet. The world seemed far away, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel so lost. But then, as I coasted along the edge of the swamp, I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me, a faint sound, almost drowned out by the rush of the tires on gravel. But then it came again, louder, more distinct, a soft, broken bark. It was weak, almost a whimper, as if something was struggling, in pain. I braked instinctively, my heart skipping a beat. The sound wasn't like any wild animal I'd heard before. It was a cry for help. I turned the wheel sharply, pulling the car to the side of the road. I sat there for a moment, unsure of what to do, the faint barking still echoing in my mind. It wasn't the kind of sound you could ignore. My heart raced, and the comforting hum of the engine seemed far away now, replaced by an overwhelming sense of urgency. Without a second thought, I swung open the door and stepped out, the cold evening air biting at my skin. The light was fading fast, and the world around me was cloaked in shadows. I followed the sound, walking slowly at first, my boots sinking into the soft ground as I made my way towards the swamp's edge. The tall grass parted under my hands as I pushed through, each step heavier than the last. The cries grew louder, more frantic, and I quickened my pace, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then I saw it. There, in the middle of the murky water, was a dog, a German shepherd, its once proud and strong form now reduced to a thin, trembling shell. Its fur, matted with mud and grime, clung to its frail body. It was stuck, its paws sinking into the thick, wet mud, its eyes wide with fear and desperation. It was struggling, its body convulsing as it fought to free itself, but it couldn't. The dog's gaze locked with mine as I approached, its eyes wide with panic. A soft whine escaped its throat, and I could hear the rasp of its breath, labored and shallow. The pitiful sound tugged at something deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time, something I had almost forgotten was there. I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't walk away from this. The swamp water was freezing cold as I waded in, my legs quickly becoming numb from the chill. The dog's body trembled as it tried to lift its head toward me, its small frame sinking deeper into the mud. I could see its paws flailing, struggling to find purchase. But the muck was relentless, pulling it back with every movement. My hands, rough and calloused from years of factory work, shook as I reached down, cupping the dog's shaking paws in mine. It flinched at first, but then, slowly, it seemed to understand that I wasn't a threat. I could feel its heartbeat racing under my hands, its fear and pain palpable in the cold air around us. Without thinking, I pulled with everything I had, the mud resisting me like a force of nature. The dog's body was so light, so fragile, but it felt like pulling a weight that was too much to bear. I heard a soft growl escape its throat as I dragged it through the muck, but there was no fight in it, only the faintest spark of will to survive. The mud was thick, clinging to my clothes, to my shoes, making every movement feel like it was draining me of everything I had left. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't leave it there. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I managed to get the dog to solid ground. We both collapsed onto the dry, cold earth, the dog panting heavily, its chest heaving as it struggled to catch its breath. I lay beside it, my heart racing, my body aching from the effort. The world around us was silent except for the sound of our breathing, the wind whispering through the trees. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and the evening was fully upon us. I could feel the dog's warmth against me, even though its body was still cold from the swamp. Its fur was matted, its breathing shallow, but it wasn't moving away. It was accepting my presence, even if it didn't fully understand it. And for some reason, that brought me a strange sense of comfort, a quiet connection I hadn't felt in years. I glanced down at the dog, my breath coming in shallow gasps as I tried to steady myself. It looked up at me, its eyes filled with gratitude, though it couldn't express it in words. I wrapped my arms around it, pulling it close, offering whatever warmth I could. The wind howled around us, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. All I could think about was getting it to safety. I reached for my jacket and carefully wrapped it around the dog, holding it close as I slowly stood, lifting the fragile creature into my arms. It weighed almost nothing, its body so thin and frail that it seemed as though it might break under the strain. I staggered back toward the car, each step slow and deliberate, my heart pounding not just from the effort, but from the responsibility I now carried. As I got to the car, I gently placed the dog in the passenger seat, wrapping it in the jacket to keep it warm. The dog's head rested against my leg, and I could feel its quiet breathing as it drifted into a calm sleep. I started the engine, the warm hum of the car a stark contrast to the cold, desolate air around us. I glanced over at the dog one last time, its eyes still closed, and I made a silent promise that I would keep it safe. The wind howled through the open windows as I drove home, the last light of the day slipping away behind me. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was headed towards something that might finally give me the peace I had been searching for. As the car rumbled on, I couldn't help but think that in saving this little life, I might have just saved my own. I carefully placed the German Shepherd puppy on the old worn rug in the corner of my apartment. The apartment, barely big enough for me, had once been shared with Rebecca. It was now a place that echoed with silence, the shadows of the past lingering in the corners. The air felt thick, weighed down with the memories of a broken marriage and the absence of someone who used to be my everything. The dog was small, but his presence was larger than I could have imagined. His coat, once soaked in mud and grime, now appeared matted and clung to his fragile body. I wasn't sure if he'd survive the night, but I couldn't bear to think of the alternative. I gave him some food and water, watching as he eagerly drank, his eyes still wary but slowly relaxing in the warmth of the apartment. After a quick cleaning, the puppy's fur began to dry and reveal its natural color, a deep brown and black mix that hinted at the strength that still lay within him. He looked more like a dog now, not a stray, and I found myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was more than a chance encounter. He was a sign, a new beginning. At least, that's what I hoped. I sat next to him, watching as he laid down, his body tense, still unsure about me. He flinched when I moved too quickly, and a soft whimper escaped his throat. I wasn't offended. I knew better than to rush trust, especially when I too was in the same place, broken, cautious, and afraid of letting anyone in. That first night I slept with one eye open, my mind too busy to rest. Max, though I had already started calling him that in my head, slept curled up in a corner of the rug, a safe distance from me. I didn't push him, it wasn't the right time, but something about his presence calmed me, made the emptiness in the apartment a little less suffocating. We were two lost souls trying to find our way back. Over the next few days, Max slowly began to trust me. He ate the food I gave him without hesitation, his guard slowly lowering with each passing day. The more I tended to him, feeding him, cleaning him, and simply being there for him, the more I began to feel that subtle, unspoken connection forming. In a way, he was becoming my anchor, just as I had become his. We began to grow together, moving in a delicate dance of dependence and companionship. Every morning, I would wake up to find him lying near my feet, his head resting on the edge of my bed. He would wait for me to stir before quietly following me as I went about my morning routine. He was like a shadow, always close but never demanding, always patient. Slowly but surely, the puppy who had once been so cautious began to lean into me, looking to me for comfort and guidance. And as he did, I found myself doing the same. A week passed, and I was busy trying to fix things around the apartment. Broken shelves, creaky doors, anything that needed repairing. One of the few things I still had from my time with Rebecca was an old, rusted coat rack. It had been part of our home, once a symbol of something we both hoped would last. Now, it was just another piece of the past that I was trying to fix. I wrestled with the metal frame, trying to tighten a loose screw when the whole thing suddenly shifted. Before I could react, the rusted metal rack tipped forward. It was heavier than I anticipated, and I had no time to move. As it came crashing down, I felt the weight of the metal bar heading straight for me. Everything happened in an instant. the loud clang of metal, my reflexes failing, and then the feeling of sheer panic as the rack descended. In that split second, I braced for impact, but instead of feeling the crushing weight of the metal on my head, I felt a strong shove. Max, my faithful companion, had launched himself at me with a burst of energy I didn't know he had, knocking me aside just in time. The metal rack hit the floor with a deafening thud, but I wasn't hurt. I looked up, dazed, my heart pounding in my chest. Max, on the other hand, was lying next to me, his body tense, his breathing rapid from the shock. I rushed to him, my hands shaking as I checked him for injuries. He had taken the full brunt of the fall, protecting me without hesitation. His fur was matted with dust from the fall, and he was panting heavily, but there didn't seem to be any deep cuts. "Max," I whispered, my voice breaking. He looked up at me, eyes wide with concern, his tail wagging weakly. I pulled him into my arms, hugging him close as I muttered words of gratitude. My heart swelled with a mixture of awe and love for the dog who had saved my life. I didn't deserve this kind of loyalty, but here it was in front of me, in the form of a small, rescued puppy who had nothing but trust and love to give. It wasn't just an act of saving me physically. No, Max had saved something inside me, something I hadn't even realized was broken. His presence, his loyalty, and the unconditional love he offered. It was a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. It was a reminder that, despite everything I had been through, there was still hope. Still the possibility of something good in my life. I held him close for a long moment, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. In that instant, the world outside, the one filled with brokenness and loss, didn't seem so dark. Max had found a way into my heart, and in return, I knew I had to do whatever it took to protect him, just as he had done for me. From that day forward, we were inseparable. Max became my constant companion, never straying far from my side. Wherever I went, he followed, his body close to mine, his presence a steady reminder that I was no longer alone. The apartment, which had once felt so empty, now felt like home again, filled with the sound of paws padding softly across the floor and the quiet warmth of shared moments. Max, the little stray who had come into my life like a whisper on the wind, had saved me. And in the process, he had given me something I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. A reason to keep going, a reason to believe that life, no matter how broken, could still hold moments of redemption and grace. A few days passed, and the vet confirmed that Max's injuries were nothing serious, a few scratches here and there, but nothing that would keep him down. When I looked into his eyes, those deep, loyal eyes that were filled with trust, something inside me stirred. It was as if, in that quiet moment, he had forgiven me for everything, every failure, every mistake, and had simply chosen to be there. His presence brought warmth to the apartment, and I found myself more at peace than I'd been in a long time. Max had become my shadow. Whether I was doing chores around the apartment, taking a break, or getting lost in my thoughts, he was always by my side. We were a team now, each of us in need of the other. The apartment, once a place of isolation, now felt like home. It was a simple existence, but it was enough. One evening, after another grueling day at the factory, I decided to take Max for a walk in the park, near the city centre. It was a way to unwind, to escape the noise in my head, even if just for a while. The air was cooler now, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the trees. Max trotted along beside me, his tail wagging with every step. The evening felt peaceful, a quiet moment of reprieve from the chaos of my thoughts. As we rounded a corner near the playground, I heard a voice that instantly made my heart skip. "Adam, is that you?" I turned, and there, standing a few feet away, was Rebecca. My heart stopped for a beat, and I wasn't sure how to react. It had been over a year since we had last spoken, and seeing her now, in the midst of my mundane, quiet life, threw me off guard. Her face, still familiar but with the softness of time, seemed hesitant as she took a few steps closer. I noticed the hint of sadness in her eyes as she looked at Max, who was happily prancing towards her. Max, as if he remembered her, bounded up to Rebecca with excitement, tail wagging furiously. He sniffed her gently, nudging her hand with his nose, like an old friend finally returning. Rebecca bent down, petting him softly, her fingers gliding through his fur with a tenderness that made me feel a strange pang in my chest. I stood there, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to say something, anything, to break the awkwardness that hung between us. But words didn't come easily. We were strangers now in a way, and yet there was an undeniable history between us. And in that moment, I realized how much time had passed, how much we had both changed. "Hey, Rebecca," I finally managed to say, my voice a little rough. She looked up at me, her eyes briefly flickering with recognition. "Hey, Adam," she replied softly, her tone warm but reserved. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was holding something back, I could tell. We exchanged a few pleasantries. She asked about work, about my life, and I answered her in short sentences, not sure how much to reveal or how much to keep to myself. The conversation was polite, almost distant, and yet there was an undeniable comfort in it, as though the years apart had been bridged, at least for this brief moment. Then she looked down at Max, and something changed. Her expression softened, a hint of a smile pulling at her lips. "You've been taking good care of him, I see," she said, her voice lighter now, almost affectionate. "He's lucky to have you." I shrugged, not sure what to say. "I guess we're both lucky," I replied, glancing down at Max, who was now happily lying on the grass, his paws in the air as he rolled around in a carefree manner. The sight made me smile, and I felt my heart lighten a little. He had been a lifeline for me, and I had tried my best to be the same for him. Rebecca studied me for a moment, her eyes searching my face. I could see the curiosity in her gaze, mixed with something else, perhaps regret, or maybe just a desire to understand. She cleared her throat softly. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I've been thinking about us a lot lately." I wasn't sure what to say to that. Thinking about us. The weight of those words hung in the air between us. There had been a time when I thought about us all the time, when every waking moment was filled with the what-ifs and why-nots. But now it felt different. I had tried to move forward, tried to let go of the past, but seeing her again made it impossible to ignore everything we had once shared. "I've been thinking too," I finally said, my voice softer, almost hesitant. "About everything, about what went wrong." I didn't look at her as I spoke. Instead, I focused on Max, who had now trotted over to me, his head resting on my knee, as if he were reminding me that he was still here. Rebecca nodded slowly, her gaze drifting down to Max as she ran her fingers through his fur. "I'm glad you found him," she said, her voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "You both seem better." I didn't know how to respond to that. "Yeah," I said after a long pause. "He's helped me more than I ever thought possible." Rebecca glanced up at me then, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like forever. There was something in them, something vulnerable and raw. "I'm sorry, Adam," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I never wanted to hurt you." The words hung in the air, suspended between us. It wasn't the apology I had expected or the one I had been waiting for, but it was the one I needed to hear. A sense of release, a shift in the weight of the past, slowly started to settle in my chest. She hadn't said much, but it was enough. For a long moment we just stood there, the silence stretching between us. Max shifted at my feet, sensing the change in the air, and I found myself stroking his fur absent-mindedly, as if he too was aware of the tension easing. "I've missed you," I finally said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I hadn't planned on saying it, but there it was, hanging between us, honest and raw. Rebecca's eyes flickered and she nodded, her lips pressed together in a tight line. "I've missed you too, Adam." And for a moment, it felt like we were both back in that space, the one where everything was possible and nothing was broken. But that moment passed quickly, like a fleeting gust of wind, and reality settled back in. "I should go," she said, after a few beats of silence. "I just wanted to see Max. And you." Her voice trailed off, as if there was something more she wanted to say, but couldn't quite find the words. "Take care of yourself, Rebecca," I said, my voice steady now. "And if you ever want to talk, you know where I am." She smiled faintly, a sad, bittersweet smile. "I will, Adam. Take care of Max." And with that, she turned and walked away, Max watching her go, his tail wagging slightly, as if he understood something I didn't. I stood there for a moment, my heart heavy, but in that quiet sadness, I felt a sense of closure, a recognition that things had changed, and so had we. As I watched her disappear into the distance, Max nudged my leg, reminding me that the path forward was still ahead of us, together. Since that unexpected encounter in the park, Rebecca had reached out a few times, her messages asking about Max, how he was settling in, and if I needed anything for him. She offered to buy more food for him, or even join me for walks, so that Max could get some exercise. At first I hesitated. My mind was still clouded with the remnants of the past, the old wounds that hadn't fully healed. I wasn't sure if reopening that door was a good idea, if there was still room for the kind of connection we once shared, or if it was simply too late to rebuild something that had already crumbled. But after a few days of thinking about it, I found myself texting her back. We agreed to meet for a walk in the same park, where we had crossed paths before. I wasn't sure what would happen, but part of me felt that if Max was the one who had helped us meet again, then maybe he could help us navigate the awkwardness too. When we met, it was like stepping into a strange, half-forgotten memory. Rebecca was standing near the park bench, her expression a little unsure, but her eyes softened when she saw Max. He, of course, was ecstatic to see her. As soon as he spotted her, he ran toward her, tail wagging wildly, as though the past year and all the distance between them had never existed. It was as if Max didn't know anything about the tension, the history between us. He just recognized her, and in that moment, all the hurt seemed to fade. She knelt down to greet him, her face breaking into a smile that was warm and genuine. For a moment, I stood there watching them. Max was nuzzling Rebecca's face, licking her hands in greeting, and she laughed softly, her voice light with a happiness that had been absent when we last spoke. It was a simple thing, two beings reconnecting over something pure and innocent, but it did something to my heart. The weight of everything that had happened between Rebecca and me began to feel lighter, as though Max was, in his own way, healing what had been broken. We walked together, just the three of us, Max running ahead, me and Rebecca side by side, both of us silent for a while. The evening was calm, the setting sun casting long shadows on the pavement, and the cool air seemed to clear the lingering fog in my mind. It felt like we were starting over in a way. There were no harsh words, no unresolved arguments hanging in the air. We were simply two people sharing space once again, no longer bound by the heavy weight of resentment. After a while, Rebecca spoke up, breaking the quiet. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day," she began, glancing at me. "About the accident. When Max saved you." Her voice softened. "I can't believe he did that. I mean, I've always known dogs were loyal, but that's something else." I nodded slowly, my mind drifting back to that moment when Max had pushed me out of harm's way, saving me from the falling metal rack. It seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the gratitude I felt for him was as raw and fresh as it had been in that instant. "Yeah, he's something else. He really saved my life." Rebecca was quiet for a few moments as we walked, the sound of Max's paws pattering ahead of us filling the silence. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I'm glad you're okay, Adam. Really. I know it sounds strange, but I've been worried about you." I stopped walking, looking at her. Her face was open now, the guarded walls she had once put up starting to crumble away. "Worried? About me?" She nodded, her eyes soft. "I guess I didn't realize how much I still cared. I know it's been a long time, but seeing you with Max, it made me realize something." She paused, looking at the ground for a second as though gathering her thoughts. "I want you to be happy. I want you to be okay." The words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I had been longing to hear them until now. It was simple, yet it was everything. An acknowledgement that we hadn't been okay, that we had both been struggling in our own ways, but there was a desire to move past it, to heal, to be better. I smiled a little, though it was a bittersweet smile. "I've been trying," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Trying to be okay. It's been hard, you know?" She nodded, and then her gaze softened further as she glanced down at Max, who had stopped ahead of us, sniffing at the grass. "I can't imagine what it's been like for you, for both of us." She paused. "I think we both lost our way for a while. But seeing you now with Max, it makes me realize that we can still find it." Her words resonated deeply within me. I hadn't expected this moment to come, not this openly, not so honestly, but here we were, acknowledging everything that had been left unsaid for so long. There was no anger, no bitterness between us now, just a shared understanding of what had gone wrong and an unspoken hope that things could be different moving forward. As we continued walking, I told her about the accident, how I'd been caught off guard, how Max had pushed me out of the way just in time, how he had saved me. As I spoke, Rebecca listened intently, her gaze focused on me, her expression softer than I remembered. "I'm glad you're safe," she said when I finished, "and I'm so glad you have him. He's more than a dog, isn't he?" She smiled faintly. "He's a lifeline, for both of us." "Yeah," I said quietly, "I think he's more than that. He's been there when I needed him most, and somehow I think he brought us back together in his own way." Rebecca's smile grew a little, and she nodded. "I think he did." Then she turned to look at Max, who had bounded back to us, looking up at us with his bright eyes, his tail wagging excitedly. "And I'm glad he's in your life, Adam. Maybe it's not too late for us to find our way back to each other too." The words were simple, but they felt like a door opening, a chance to step forward and leave the past behind. I didn't know what the future held for Rebecca and me, but in that moment, I realized that the healing had already begun. Max had bridged the gap between us, not just with his loyalty and love, but with his presence, reminding us of what really mattered. Rebecca looked at me again, this time her eyes clear, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the possibility of something better, something more. "Maybe we'll figure it out," I said softly, and she smiled, a real smile this time. "Maybe we will." And for the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of the past seemed a little lighter. Our little dates with Max became more frequent. There was something so simple, so comforting about those moments. We'd sit together on a park bench, Max lying at our feet, and talk about everything and nothing. The mundane details of life that, in those days, felt like the only things that truly mattered. It wasn't grand or extraordinary, but it was enough. Rebecca started to laugh more, her laughter ringing out in the quiet evenings, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of warmth I hadn't known in ages, the kind of warmth that only a family can bring. I had forgotten what it felt like to be at peace with someone else, to share the simple moments of life, the everyday things that bind us together. In those small interactions, I could feel the distance between us begin to close. It was as if time, which had once separated us, was starting to heal the wounds that had kept us apart. Max, of course, was always there. As loyal as ever, he was our bridge, our silent companion who had managed to mend what had been broken. His presence was a comfort, both to me and to Rebecca. Whenever I was tired or overwhelmed, he would nudge his way to my side, resting his head in my lap, as if to remind me that everything was going to be okay. He had an uncanny ability to sense when I needed him most. It wasn't just his loyalty, it was his love that brought us closer, that held us together in a way words never could. One evening, as we sat in the park watching the sunset, Rebecca turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Why don't I come over to your place for dinner tomorrow?" she suggested casually, her voice filled with a kind of lightness that made me feel the possibility of something more. "We can cook something together, and I can check on that coat rack you've been talking about." The idea of her coming over didn't feel as daunting as it once would have. I hadn't expected to be so open to it, but with Max by my side and the warmth between us growing, I felt more at ease. "That sounds great," I said, my heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I'll make sure the place is ready for you." The next evening, Rebecca arrived at my apartment, carrying a small bag of groceries. Max greeted her enthusiastically as always, his tail wagging furiously. She smiled at him, and then at me, and for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of normalcy. We cooked together, laughing as we worked, finding small joys in the simplicity of preparing a meal. The evening unfolded naturally, like a rhythm we had both forgotten, but somehow knew how to follow. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Max curled up on the rug near the sofa, watching us quietly. The soft golden light from the lamp bathed the room in warmth, and I could feel the tension in my shoulders ease. There, in the quiet comfort of my living room, Rebecca and I sat side by side, our arms brushing occasionally. It was enough just to be in the same space, no pressure, no expectations, just two people reconnecting piece by piece. Max, content as ever, had made his way over to Rebecca, resting his head on her lap. She gently stroked his fur, her hand moving in slow, soothing motions. The sight of her with him, her fingers running through his coat, her face relaxed in the soft glow of the room, was a moment of perfect simplicity. And for the first time in a long while, I realized how much I had missed this feeling. The quiet, unspoken bond between two people who had once been close, now rediscovering each other. Without a word, I reached out and took Rebecca's hand. Our fingers intertwined, and I could feel the connection between us, stronger than any words could express. She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine, and in that look I saw everything, the years of pain, the mistakes, and the hope that had begun to sprout once more. We didn't need to say much. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding, with the kind of communication that goes beyond words. In that moment, I realized that everything had changed. Rebecca and I had been given a second chance, and while we couldn't undo the past, we could create something new together. I looked down at Max, his body curled comfortably against Rebecca's, his tail lightly thumping the floor as if he, too, understood that something beautiful was happening. As the evening wore on, the world outside seemed far away. The noise, the struggles, the years of loneliness, all of it faded into the background. There was just the three of us now, sitting together in the warm glow of the apartment, finding solace in each other's company. When Rebecca looked at me again, there was a softness in her gaze, a tenderness that spoke volumes. "I'm glad we're here, Adam," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed her hand, feeling my heart swell with gratitude. "Me too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd feel this way again, but I'm glad we're here too." For a moment, there was only the quiet hum of the evening, the steady sound of Max's breathing, and the warmth of our hands intertwined. It was as if the world outside had paused, giving us this brief, perfect moment to simply be. Max shifted in his sleep, his head still resting on Rebecca's lap, his body relaxed and content. I smiled at the sight, knowing that somehow he had been the catalyst for all of this. It wasn't just about rescuing him, it was about the way he had brought us back together. In his quiet, steadfast loyalty, he had healed a part of me I didn't even know was broken. As I sat there, hand in hand with Rebecca, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful again, like the darkness that had overshadowed my life for so long was finally beginning to lift. And in that quiet moment, I silently thanked life for giving me Max and for giving me Rebecca back in a way I hadn't dared to hope for. We were starting over, not just with the love we had once lost, but with something stronger, something more resilient, built not on the mistakes of the past, but on the possibilities of the future. And as Max lay beside us, his body curled up in peaceful sleep, I realized that sometimes healing doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it happens quietly, in the small moments, the ones we almost miss. But in those moments we find that love, trust and hope are reborn even when we least expect it. I used to think my life was like a piece of scrap metal, discarded and left to rust. But Max, the stray dog once stuck in the swamp, changed everything. From the moment I pulled him out of the mud to the instant he shoved me out of harm's way, Max became the anchor that helped me awaken and break free from the mental fog that had kept me trapped. And because of Max, I found Rebecca again, the woman I thought I would never be able to mend things with. Slowly, we began to heal the wounds between us, sharing caring gestures and beautiful memories, just like we used to. The lesson I've learned: sometimes a small act, like saving a stranger, can open the door to miracles. Kindness and loyalty, whether from people or animals, have the power to heal even the deepest of wounds. And if we open our hearts, we'll see that hope is always there, even in the darkest of times. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us about a time when kindness, big or small, changed your life. May God bless you and your loved ones with love and light always.